All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the 2020 PacTrans CSET Region 10 Transportation Conference webinar. My name is John Tomlinson. I'm the Office of Highway Safety Manager for the Idaho Transportation Department, and I welcome all of you. Thank you for joining us. I'll be moderating this session. We have three great speakers today, all talking about the current issues in transportation safety. We encourage you, if you have any questions, to use the Q&A box that can be accessed via the icon at the bottom of your screen. Each presenter is going to have 15 minutes. They're going to take their turn and discuss the current issues, and we will wait for after those presentations to answer those questions. But go ahead and do that. Put those in the Q&A. If you like a question that someone's put on there, you can do a thumbs up, like it, and that'll bump it up toward the top. We'll go ahead and get started now with our first speaker. Nathan Belz is an associate professor in civil engineering at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. He's the assistant director of the Center for Safety, Equity, and Transportation and director of the Transportation Research and Printables Lab. His primary research interest is how and why people make the transportation choices that they do and the implications for safety and efficiency of our roadways. He also serves as committee research coordinator for the TRB Committee on Roundabouts and Alternative Intersections. He's a member of the TRB Committee on Native American Transportation Issues and the UAF Honors Faculty Advisor Council and the UAF Community Garden Committee. Nathan is an avid cyclist, forager, and hobby farmer. He spends much of his free time enjoying the wilderness and wonderful trails that Alaska has to offer with his fiancée and four-legged adventure comrades, Teal, Hatcher, and Flynn. Nathan.
Hey, thanks, John. As you can probably appreciate, it's always a gamble when you ask or give an academic an open-ended question like, what are the current issues in transportation safety? But that's what happened, and here we go. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. And there we go. So do a quick search here. Bear with me as I type this in. And okay, well, appears that link is broken. That's interesting. Well, it's much the same way that I feel about our transportation system. So what I'm going to be talking about for my period of time here is how we've perhaps found ourselves in the most unsafe transportation climate in over a decade, and the single largest threat that I feel is to any roadway user out there. So as I was putting this together, I did a poll to some of my colleagues and those in the transportation world that I hold in the highest regard, and asked them, hey, what do you think is our biggest issue right now? And as you can expect, I got a lot of similar answers from these folks. Obviously, COVID has presented several challenges. Even though the number of crashes has been reduced slightly, that we're seeing increases in the number of crashes that result in fatalities. So fewer crashes overall, but higher percentage of fatalities. Obviously, connected and autonomous vehicles is a very hot topic. The implications of connectivity and varied levels of autonomy, and having those in a mixed environment with smart and not so smart vehicles, and the period of time in which it's going to take us to get to a point where it's pervasive across the vehicle fleet. But for me, that's not the most critical issue. Others discuss climate change and the threats to our infrastructure and our communities from climate change. Here in Alaska, a recent study that was done jointly by the Army Corps of Engineers, the Institute of Northern Engineering, and a few others, identified 29 of the 187 rural communities as being classified as high threat for flooding and erosion. And some of these are just knocking on the doorsteps of our communities. Others that I polled brought up micromobility solutions and a lot of the safety implications there. It was estimated that in 2019, 136 million person trips were made on shared micromobility devices such as e-scooters, e-bikes, shared bikes. And those present several challenges. But for me, that's still not the primary issue. Other folks brought up the new ease of transportation safety. It used to be evaluation, education, enforcement, and we're now looking toward these new E's: equity, ethics, and empathy. Really thinking about trying to redefine safety and develop programs, strategies, and the like that are going to promote safe communities. Thinking about our people, prioritizing our people, so that folks can get around on foot and can ride around on bikes, and parents can push their kids in strollers, and children can learn how to ride their bikes in the streets or in places that are safe to do so. But really working toward having a transportation system that's going to work for everyone. And that is still, for me, not the, I guess, the single most current or critical issue for me. It's that I really think that we have forgotten how to be human. And to give you a little bit of context there, back when I was working on my PhD, I was fascinated with the fact that people were so opposed to roundabouts. It was this very polarized. There were very polarized sentiments about roundabouts. Either people were very supportive of them, or they were completely opposed. Just don't put those things there. And I spent a lot of time thinking about this and trying to identify like why people would construct arguments against them. And what ended up coming across was this concept that the way in which we create our or have certain attitudes or have certain values has a lot to do with first proximity, how close we are to things. So how close we are to things in space and how close we are to things in time. And both of those dictate what kind of exposure we have to certain experiences and certain influences. But then overlaid on that is where we live and where we work and where we play. But those things all together really feed into the things that we value and that we hold in the highest regard, and then also our attitudes, the way we feel about those things. And from those sort of lead, four issues. So the first is being misinformed or having misinformation. The second is our emotional needs, so that the things that we need to feel good or to feel happy. But then also from those also arise both conflicts of interest and conflicts of values. And I think this is where we're at currently, is a conflict of values. And for me, it leaves me sitting there saying to myself, well, if I just close my eyes for a while, maybe all this mess will disappear, right? The classic Eeyore quote from Winnie the Pooh. And I say all these things, and I pose a couple of statistics here regarding distracted driving and cell phone use. So in 2018, 2,800 people roughly were killed as a result of distracted driving. Additional 397,000 injuries were caused by texting alone. And currently, we have 25 states with outright cell phone bans. Right? We've just deemed it to be inappropriate to be using these devices while we're operating a motor vehicle. But these things are trying to get our attention constantly, right? And like for those of you who have watched the recent Netflix documentary series, The Social Dilemma, they discuss why that's the case, and there's all these algorithms that are just trying to get our attention constantly. And I think beyond that, in some senses, we have forgotten really what it means to be human, like I said, and I think we've forgotten how to afford ourselves the time to enjoy movement. I think that we have lost the human element of transporting through in our environments. We often overlook the fact that we're not only responsible to ourselves when we get behind the wheel of a vehicle or get on a bicycle or get on an e-scooter, but we're also responsible for everyone else around us. And we also have to hold both ourselves and others accountable for being safe and making safe choices. So I would like to encourage everyone to just look. So look around, look ahead, keep your eyes on the road, and really look out for each other. And I would encourage you to think about the first time that you got home from school, and sitting there in the driveway was your first bike, right? Your mom and dad had bought you a bike, and recognizing what that meant to you, right? So for a lot of people, you ask them, hey, what did that first bike mean to you? And they say freedom. Freedom means that I can go anywhere. And I think in saying that I can go anywhere is not quite the correct way to say that. I think what a bike meant to most of us, whether we recognize it or not, is that I can take myself anywhere. Under my own power, I can take myself anywhere I want to go. So taking a moment to reflect and think back on that, I would just encourage you all to take a moment and slow down and join me in what I would like to call the slow transportation movement. And that slow transportation movement can be whatever you want it to mean. That can mean maybe traveling 5 miles an hour slower, giving yourself an extra 15 minutes to get to work. We had a little bit of freezing rain yesterday here in Fairbanks, and I encountered 5 vehicles off the road on my 8-mile commute to work this morning. So remembering to give yourself extra time, or giving yourself enough time to maybe bike to work once a week or twice a week. But taking the time to slow down and recognize that there are others out there, and our choices consequently affect us and others as well. And in slowing down, hopefully we can all together create a transportation culture where a person can choose any mode of travel and reasonably expect to get where they need to go and get home in one piece. So thank you for listening. If you've got any questions, I think there's plenty of time in the Q&A at the end. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Nathan. Appreciate that. Was great information. Our next presenter is Hillary Isebrands, a senior roadway safety engineer from Federal Highway Administration. Hillary's PE, PhD, has served in the transportation profession for over 24 years. She focuses her work on improving the design and safety of our nation's roadways by providing technical assistance, training, and technology deployment of proven safety countermeasures. Hillary is currently a senior roadway safety engineer and team leader with the FHWA Resource Center, Safety and Design National Technical Service Team. She specializes in the safety and design of local and rural roadways and roundabouts. Hillary is a professional engineer, National Highway Institute certified instructor, the 2019 FHWA Engineer of the Year, and has her BS, MS, and PhD in civil engineering. Hillary is a secretary for the TRB Committee on Roundabouts, past member of the TRB Committee on Geometric Design, and past chair of the ITE Roundabout Task Force. Hillary.
Thank you so much, John. And thank you, Nathan, for that inspiration headed into my presentation. Welcome, everyone. I come to you from Colorado. We are in the middle of a lot of high winds and fires, and I know a lot of you can relate to that where you are. And I'll touch on that briefly as I go through the presentation, but it was a challenge. We've got 15 minutes to, what do I want to talk about related to transportation safety? I really feel fortunate that I get to live and breathe safety every day in my work. And I try to do the same in my personal life as well. So the topics that I chose to speak about were the safe system approach, intersection control evaluation, local and rural road safety, and then education on safety. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with the safe system approach. It is something that our international colleagues in New Zealand, Sweden, Australia have been pursuing in their practice for quite some time. And in the US, it has emerged on the scene a few years ago. Federal Highways just recently, our Office of Safety has put out a 2-page brochure, education about safe system, but also how we might tackle that here in the United States. I know ITE, Institute of Transportation Engineers, has been working on this, as well as many state DOTs and TRB. But as you guys know, for the states that are represented in this group today, as well as our Alaska Natives and our tribal partners. 0 is our goal. 0 deaths on our roadways, all roadways is our goal. And we really believe that a safe system is how we're going to get there. And there are several principles that I'm going to just discuss briefly, but I know for some of you this might be new information, but a great opportunity for us to dive deep into how we practice. Nathan brought up some terms like, we talk about the 4 E's, that's clearly a part of this, but I love that you've added those other E's with equity, ethics, empathy, Nathan, as we have this conversation, because it plays right into really safety culture. So first principle with the safe system approach is death and serious injury is absolutely unacceptable on our roadways. We have to believe that, we have to live that, we have to practice that. We also have to realize that we all make mistakes. Some people attribute to, they were drunk or they were impaired, they were distracted. But I'll tell you what, I consider myself a fairly safe driver, but I make mistakes too. I do potentially get distracted by my kids in the back seat or the deer, or I see some elk, a moose. We get distracted and we do make mistakes. So, but just because I make a mistake doesn't mean I should lose my life or someone else should lose their life. We also have to accept the fact that we are all very vulnerable. There is a limit to what our bodies can take in a vehicle if we are in a crash, or if someone is a pedestrian, if someone hits them. It's pure physics, kinetic energy, it's velocity squared. The faster we are moving, the more damage is going to be done. And so we know that sweet spot. Nathan mentioned, go 5 miles per hour slower. Absolutely. We know the speeds that are survivable on our system. So we need to think about that as we think of our network. The shared responsibility across everyone, the E's, public health, maintenance, it's all of us working together. It's, oftentimes drivers don't see the transition from a city road to a county road to a state highway. We all have to be working together and we all have to be on the same page when it comes down to safety. Being proactive. Historically, transportation, we have been reactive. We find the fatal crash or the severe crash, dead man's curve, and that's our project. We solve that problem, but we need to get ahead of that. And that is really the systemic approach to safety, which is identifying those risks where crashes can occur and getting in front of the next crash. And finding treatments that can be proactive, be deployed proactively before those crashes occur. Redundancy is also critical to the success. Redundancy, we talk about that in our practice in terms of the stop ahead sign before the stop sign, and having a shoulder with a rumble strip, say. There are strategies that play right into the safe system approach. Roundabouts are one of them. It's a game changer. We've reduced speeds. We've reduced conflict points. With rumble strips, it gives you that 1 second of information as a driver if you're distracted, if you're drowsy, to correct and perhaps prevent a crash from happening. So this approach is something that you're going to hear more about if you haven't heard it already. And I think it's a great, again, we've talked about safety culture before, but this safe system approach really is something that we can all strive for. Now I'm going to talk to you a little bit about performance. So performance-based design, and I'm going to focus in on intersections or intersection control evaluation, which really is a data-driven performance-based approach to selecting alternatives for intersection design. There's a lot of different ways that states are using this. This goes way back over 10 years for the state of Minnesota. The state of Minnesota has had an intersection control evaluation policy for a very long time. The map there, the states that are in dark blue are the states that do have a policy, a current approved policy. And then you can see there's lots of other states that are working on ICE policies. What this performance-based decision-making process for intersections has done for many of these states is it's made it very transparent. We've looked at performance measures in safety and operations, environmental impacts, and really the cost for implementation, and then life cycle costs, and had to be transparent about our decision-making process. The other piece that has been instrumental with the deployment of these policies has been elevating the use of and deployment of innovative intersections, and innovative intersections that provide an efficient travel as well as safe travel through our intersections and interchanges. There's many states that have had trouble integrating the roundabout, integrating a diverging diamond interchange or a restricted crossing U-turn type intersection into their network and into their process. And this intersection control evaluation policy has basically said, you have to show us how that can or cannot work for this particular location. So again, this is very much emerging and an opportunity here, folks. Now this is anticipated. This isn't, there's nothing on the street yet, but NCHRP 1798 will be an intersection control evaluation guide that is being pursued through the NCHRP process. So although Federal Highways has put out a primer on intersection control evaluation and some of those early adopters in the process that they have, this will actually look a little bit larger and in a little bit more detail on the intersection control evaluations and the successes that many states have had. So for you researchers out there, I know you guys keep an eye on this stuff. I want to talk a little bit about some innovative roundabout deployment. As my bio says, roundabouts are about 50% of what I do, but always looking at sharing those first attempts that we have out there. And here's an example from Missouri Department of Transportation. You've got a DDI with a roundabout, and by golly, there it is constructed. That's near Kansas City, Missouri. Missouri DOT has 2 DDIs with roundabouts. So just doubling down really on safety and efficiency at these interchanges with a roundabout and a diverging diamond interchange. So be watching projects like this. This is not only, you take a little risk when you do something like this, but we're hoping to reap those safety and operational benefits. I'm going to share one other piece with innovative roundabout deployment would be temporary roundabouts. Temporary roundabouts for construction, during construction. The story here on the right is from Wilmington, North Carolina. They had Hurricane Florence came rolling through in September of 2018. Law enforcement was trying to tackle the traffic control at all the signalized intersections where the lights were out, there's no electricity. Police officer said, hey, I want to make a temporary roundabout here so our guys can go and work on the flooding and the other emergencies that we have in our community because of the hurricane. And lo and behold, it worked. They were able to free up other officers to do other things. In fact, they have now included the temporary roundabout as part of their emergency management plan, and they are able to deploy that pretty quickly. One other innovative roundabout deployment that's coming is turbo roundabouts. Our friends in the Netherlands, Germany, Poland have been implementing turbo roundabouts for some time. It's a slight variation of our modern roundabout with some raised channelization to try to prevent property damage only crashes. We will have our first turbo roundabout in the United States in Jacksonville, Florida next year. California and Georgia DOTs are pursuing turbo roundabouts pretty aggressively. And so this is something that we need to watch as well. We have no guidance in the United States. We have a primer. Federal Highways has prepared a primer, but we really don't know how turbos and those features that have worked so well internationally, how those might work and fit into our modern roundabout deployment here in the United States. All right. I'm going to talk to you about local and rural road safety now. I know that many of you are very aware of the safety issues on our rural roadways. And we know that about 19% of the nation's population live in rural areas, but 45% of our fatalities are occurring in our rural areas. So that is a big challenge for all of us. There's a lot of conversations that are going on. I'm not sure if any of you participated in the National Summit on Rural Road Safety the last week of September, or saw the inaugural Rural Road Safety Awareness Week also the last week of September. But from those two efforts, a summit that had over 400 people and the social media campaign on rural road safety, some topics really emerged. One of them was really the theme of safe system approach. How can we use that safe system approach to improve safety on rural roadways? We have to, as a profession, celebrate the incremental successes, the one day, the 1 week, the 1 month without a fatal crash. And you can be more specific. The city of San Diego celebrates, I believe it was 2017 and 2018, they had 0 bicycle fatalities in their community, and they were celebrating that success. Partnerships, we can't say enough about partnerships. Basically having a wingman that maybe is not in your same wheelhouse. For me, as an engineer, maybe it's someone in law enforcement or someone in public health. And let me talk a little bit more about the public health aspect. There is a lot of overlap and overlapping goals with public health and transportation. We've got some great stories. Clackamas County, Oregon has someone on staff, Abe, who has 1 foot in planning, or sorry, 1 foot in transportation and 1 foot in public health. Because both of those, their focus and their goals have to do with safe roads, healthy people, and a vibrant economy. And so they are really changing how they approach the work that they are doing for the better, I believe. I think it's really something to be watching. Minnesota has Towards Zero Death regions, Northeast region and the Duluth area, that whole area up in the Northeast, a public health leader that is working with the DOTs, with the local agencies, with the hospitals, with the public health departments to really have a better understanding of the issues and how they're going to get to zero. How are we going to get to zero in Minnesota? And some great examples coming out of Minnesota and their regions and their coalitions that they have around Towards Zero Deaths. AASHTO and NCHRP, there's been some recent publications that have come out related to the interface of public health and what we do. Clearly, the pandemic has changed, the priorities of public health, but please continue to think about how public health can improve what we are doing in our profession. I want to talk a little bit about local road safety plans. Again, you can see a map there that the states in dark blue are states that have embraced local road safety plans. We know that approximately 40 to 60% of fatalities occur on locally owned roads. Now, I know it's very different for Alaska than it is for Washington, but if we're going to get to zero, everyone who owns a roadway and operates a roadway is going to have to work together. More than 75% nationally, all roads are maintained by local agencies. That's a huge number. We also have seen the successes of local road safety plans. So this is a complement to a strategic highway safety plan. Minnesota saw a 25% reduction in county road fatalities after their 87 counties implemented the local road safety plans. Thurston County, Washington saw a 35% reduction in severe curve crashes after the implementation of their first local road safety plan, again, with the help of the Washington State DOT and the Washington LTAP, working together to reduce those fatal and injury crashes. Federal Highways is happy to announce that we have just launched our local road safety plan do-it-yourself website. There's no way that everyone that like me who works in the local and rural area can get to the almost 3,100 counties and tens of thousands of local agencies to help develop a plan. So we tried to create that experience, if you will, in a virtual environment with lots of videos, interviews of folks that have developed plans, example plans, how-to steps, resources. We've got a crash tree diagram spreadsheet that we're going to get ready to launch here in the next couple of weeks. So hopefully a great resource for those that might be looking to help local agencies develop a local road safety plan, again, to get to that goal of zero. The other resources are templates and on developing the plan. The model that we were using through the pilot process was do what you can with what you have where you are. You can't tackle everything at once, but what can I tackle today? Maybe there's a maintenance project upcoming that I can address chevrons on my curve projects. Also, just share that quote with you that hopefully I can get a copy of this presentation to you all, that you can take it away with you if you would like. But really, the idea is thinking about what impact you can have today for the future of your community and the future of our network. And last but not least, I think it's so important that we continue to educate ourselves, be a lifelong learner, always learn something new, and we got to think of new ways of getting our message out there. With social media, YouTube, and all the like, shorter videos that can be appropriate for the public as well as elected officials and for professionals as well. The video there in the middle is from Lummi Nation in Washington State. I love the story that they tell about the tragedy, but also as well as the success of implementing a separated pathway along a corridor there on the Lummi Nation. So we have to continue to tell our story, to tell what is happening, and we're in it together. It's going to take all of us, and it's going to take a collaborative effort and time for us to get to zero. But I think having that goal, we all know that the answer to the question, zero in my family, I hope it's zero in your family as well. And with that attitude, we certainly can get there. And with that, I thank you so much, and we'll save questions for a little bit later. Thanks, John.
Great, Hillary, thank you. Great information. I will just throw in a plug. If you have questions, keep submitting those in the Q&A box. We will have plenty of time after Pamela's remarks to get to those. So just keep those rolling. And I know Nathan's been answering a few already. So we appreciate the questions coming in. I'd like to introduce our third speaker. Pamela Golden is the Northern Region Traffic and Safety Engineer for the Alaska Department of Transportation and Public Facilities. A graduate of Georgia Tech, Pam has worked in engineering for over 20 years. She fell in love with traffic engineering when she had an opportunity to move into the field at the Idaho Transportation Department nearly 15 years ago. Eager to raise her young family in Alaska, she joined the Alaska Department of Transportation and Public Facilities as the Northern Region Traffic and Safety Engineer in 2011. She's responsible for the oversight of the region's Highway Safety Improvement Program, which focuses on reducing injury and fatal crashes. Now that her kids are driving, her passion for highway safety is stronger than ever. Since joining the department, Pam has initiated around 40 highway safety improvement projects for both urban and rural roadways in Alaska. With that, Pam, go ahead.
Thank you, John. So like Nathan and Hillary, when asked about doing a presentation for today, it took me a bit to dial into what I could add as a practitioner who likes to keep on the down low and be behind the scenes and not a researcher. So what can I add to this discussion? It's such a broad topic. My mind went back to everyday counts initiatives, and in particular EDC 5's focus on reducing rural roadway departure crashes. And more specifically, as I started to develop it, wintertime is a big deal in Alaska. So what are we doing for that? Make sure my chat pod is open just in case. Okay, sorry about that. So rural roadways in Alaska, a little overview of our massive state. Alaskans like to brag if you cut the state in half that Texas would become the third largest state. But the reality of it is our road system is pretty compact in comparison to our size. So the red lines on the map there represent the named highway system, which is our trunk system. Connects communities, connects us through Canada back to the lower 48. Outside of Fairbanks, Anchorage, and a little bit of Juneau, most of our highways are 2-lane rural roads. Miles and miles of it. Most of the system has poor or no cell coverage. There's no electricity to power things like ITS equipment. And in some cases, like the highway to the North Slope, there's no redundancy in the system. So if there's any major natural event, it really kind of wreaks havoc. This is just a small sampling of what our rural roadways look like. Nathan had some photos earlier of some of our villages as well. They're paved, they're not paved, they're modern, they're narrow. They're built on permafrost and prone to frost heaves. We have frost heaves. It's incredible. And then we have some that are on perfectly stable ground. So we have seasonal rural highways that aren't maintained at all in the winter. Others that have to be kept open for commerce, even in the harshest of conditions. In a normal year, Alaskan roads require frequent and substantial maintenance. When Mother Nature wants to take a swipe at us, things get extra dicey. Just for fun, that's the 2018 earthquake on the top left that happened in November 2018 down in the Anchorage area. That one made national news. That top right photo was referred to as the Damalanche in 2014, where a pair of avalanches slid into the low river and dammed it up, and then it flooded out the highway, cutting off Valdez. And then this photo at the bottom, believe it or not, there's a highway there. That was the Sag River flood that's the road to the North Slope that just got completely wiped out, cutting off all trucking to the North Slope, which was a huge deal for commerce. But like I said, I really kind of wanted to focus on wintertime lane departures. These photos are from yesterday at 1 p.m. from our 511 cameras. The one on the top left is at the Canadian border on the Alaska Highway. The one on the bottom right is about 60 miles southeast of Fairbanks. If you look closely, you can make out rumble strips, shoulder rumbles on both, centerline rumbles on the one on the bottom. But like it or not, it's winter here. As Nathan mentioned, there was freezing rain, and that's why I'm doing this from home and didn't go into the office. In Alaska, it's dark in the winter all the time. It's light all the time in the summer. It's dark. It can get dangerously cold. Medical facilities are few and far between, and there's little to no law enforcement. I hate to say that, but we just don't have a big highway safety law enforcement presence. So keeping vehicles on the road is critical. Low volume, a lot of us are relying on passerbys to pull us out of the ditch if something happens. So I want to highlight a few of the things that we're doing, that actually some of the things Hillary mentioned, and then some of the challenges we face getting into that. So before I get into specific countermeasures that we've deployed, I want to also acknowledge that the progress being made in automation, but like many northern tier states, we know that automated vehicles are going to be heavily reliant on lines and markings. And like most northern tier states, we have no idea how that's going to work for us. This is what our highway looks like in October. You can see particularly in the bottom photo that the wheel path in the far side lane is right over the rumble strip. So just a challenge going forward for both the development of the automation systems and the highway agencies is, how is this going to work? Hillary mentioned rumble strips. We've been putting in rumble strips since 2000. By the time our rumble strip policy went into effect, there were over 2,000 miles of roadway that had been treated with shoulder rumble strips at one time. Unfortunately, as projects came through or maintenance had to do a patching job, there were gaps in the system because there was no rumble milling machine even present in the state of Alaska. And it's not like we could borrow one from the next state over. They had to be barged up. So to do a few miles here or there for a project or large patching job was not cost effective. In 2009 and in that general time frame, there were a few HSIP projects that actually went and reestablished all of those to make sure that we had a robust rumble strip system. We have centerline rumbles strategically deployed heading out of Anchorage to some points to the south and north there. And then here in Fairbanks, about 50 miles to one side of Fairbanks and about 100 miles to the other side, where we had a history of head-on and passing type, not passing, head-on collisions. Our policy is for shoulder rumbles and not for edge line rumbles, but we recognize that some of our roads just didn't have rumbles because we didn't have shoulders, and we pursued a couple of HSIP projects beginning around 2015 as far as installation to do edge line rumbles. We didn't want to take away the ability for bikes to use the shoulder, so we were strategic into where we could put those. And then of course we have the other issue where some of our roads are high float or chip seal and the pavement just wouldn't support them. But we've tried to put them out everywhere we can put them. Enhanced horizontal alignment. I remember when I first moved up to Alaska going to a peer exchange on safety in Oklahoma City, and I can't remember which state it was, but it was like, this is the year of the curves. We kind of took that to heart. And like most states, we had to assess our horizontal alignment warning signs to meet the compliance dates in the 2009 METCD. That top right photo is a curve that meets all the requirements, but as you can see, the signs sort of blend into the background, or as my coworkers have heard me say more times than they probably wish, they've become highway wallpaper. You just don't see them anymore. This particular spot, we have also tried optical speed bars, if you are wondering. The curves on the photo on the left and on the bottom right are between the city of Fairbanks and a large gold mine. So a lot of folks commuting to work out at the gold mine. The highway is posted 55 miles an hour. So you've got a 30-mile-an-hour hairpin curve. Speeding is a huge issue on this road. We worked with mine on a safety campaign they had a few years ago. And we, with our radar gun, clocked multiple people driving over 90 miles an hour leading into this area. So it's not a surprise that this particular curve was overrepresented with crashes. So this is one of the 3 spots that we did an initial HSIP project to try oversized and fluorescent yellow signs. So much positive feedback. People just loved them. And we don't get a lot of positive feedback on what we do. So that was very reassuring. So when we went to do our compliance review for the 2009 METCD and the horizontal alignment signs, our region actually selected to use the oversized fluorescent yellow signs on any curve where the advisory speed was more than 15 miles per hour below the posted speed. So we could really highlight the need to slow down for those. So these 2 countermeasures, rumbles, which interestingly enough, I failed to mention, we don't actually consider those to be mitigating for wintertime crashes, but here in the interior, our snow is quite dry and it gets blown out of the rumbles when cars drive over them. So we still very much see a benefit from them in the winter as far as that advising people that they're drifting out of their lane. And then these oversized fluorescent yellow chevrons, they're great in the summer too. You know, they're bigger, they pop, but in the winter when it's dark or even in the shoulder seasons, just having that extra feedback can really help keep folks on the road. Guardrail delineation, you know, we've got, how do we delineate this snow-covered roadway on a snow-covered landscape? And, you know, as you all know, guardrails really only present where we're protecting from a bigger hazard. We use the butterfly tabs in the web, and we've also started using these tabs on the top. There was some initial resistance from our maintenance folks about potentially shearing those off when they're doing snow removal operations. It seems to be going okay, but the photo on the bottom right is from our Central Region Traffic and Safety Engineer going down one of the safety corridors where they did some enhanced delineation. And it just really pops now. Hasn't snowed yet in that photo, but it's coming. We've also looked at some targeted installations of the corrugated retroreflective strips in the web of the guardrail in some curves with higher crash incidents. We've tried it on box beam. The adhesive stuck in the summer. Between our extreme cold temperatures and our snow removal operations, it came right off. So we're not using it for box beam going forward. And although, at least in Alaska, we don't use concrete barrier on our rural roads, we just have started installing some of these new MASH compliant, actually, barriers. And one of our engineers in the traffic section came up with the idea to inset those retroreflective corrugated markers so that as the plows kind of scrape the snow off, they're not also scraping those markers off. And if anybody is interested, we can get more information to anybody as to how we set all that up. So then what do we do in snow areas? We have, these are both out of our Alaska traffic manual. It's easy to Google if anybody wants the information. We have the shoulder snow pole, which is fairly similar to what you'd see on a freeway for a delineator. And then we have the overhead snow pole because snowplow operations are not kind to shoulder delineators. So the overhead snow poles work really great, except where we have cross-jacking issues, which cause them to possibly lean and present a less uniform appearance to the driver. All of this is leading me up to the Dalton Highway. So the Dalton Highway is the highway to the North Slope. If you've watched Ice Road Truckers or some of those shows about the most dangerous roads in the country or the world, the Dalton Highway is often featured. White delineators are required by the MUTCD for both sides of the 2-lane road. The Dalton Highway is about 415 miles long, and that doesn't even count the highways you have to take to get to the Dalton Highway. There's really no facilities for trucks to pull over. It's a mixture of paved and unpaved. It doesn't have shoulders. You could pull one of those semis over to wait out a storm. So they have to keep moving. There's no stopping when the weather conditions become so bad that most of us would pull off. So it's CB communications everywhere, but the photo on the left is a pretty typical winter day. Now remember, north of the Arctic Circle, there's no daylight for a good chunk of the winter at all. Here in Fairbanks, we're well south. We have about 3 hours and 45 minutes at winter solstice. So dark, dark, dark. So the conditions on the Dalton Highway, it's tundra, there's no trees, you get ground blizzards, the snow just blows around, really takes your visibility to nearly nothing. That said, if you look in the photo on the right, you see those cantilevered flexible markers with some white retroreflective pieces on them. We call that the Dalton Delineator. It's just the name we've given it because it's the only place we use them. The sheeting doesn't stick to the carcinite markers. Temperatures in this area can get to the -60s. The records are in the -70s. So they're basically like miniature signs that are kind of bolted onto the flexible marker. But as you can see, on a gray day, even the ones on the far left or the ones in the opposite direction are pretty hard to see. So we know we're not alone in the fact that white delineators on a snow roadway or in a blowing snow situation are tough to see. We actually went out and installed some test sections using vertical markers with type 11 sheeting, like what's the baddest, brightest sheeting we could get out there. Our intent would be that if this was received favorably, that we might go out and do these in a bigger deployment and also upgrade the horizontal markers. Some of the feedback we got is that it might be too bright when it's clear out. We have some video on our website. If you just Googled Dalton Delineators Fairbanks or Dalton Delineators, you would get to a website where we talked about some different options we looked at, and there's actually video of one of our M&O guys driving through. This is actually a beautiful day on the Dalton Highway where it's nice and clear and things really pop. But so that was kind of if we have to stick with white, what do we do to make it more visible? It's still a challenge. Sorry, screen sharing has stopped and the window has closed. Oh my, what have I done? Y'all can still hear me. Stand by. I gotta get this
yeah, we can still hear you.
Okay. I don't know what happened there. So. I was down to the second to last slide even. Sorry about that, folks. Slideshows start from current. Now you get to hear me talk through myself trying to figure it out, no less. And darn it. Share screen. I'm very sorry about that. So hopefully the last slide here is up. So getting back to the white delineators on both sides of the highway, on the private oil field roads, they have gotten themselves around that issue by using a yellow marker on the left with the 2 vertical strips and a white marker on the right. Does not comply at all to the MUTCD. The blue retroreflective sheeting is their way of noting that there's a driveway that's entering, so that they kind of have that additional awareness that somebody could be approaching from the side. So the Alaska Truckers Association would really, really like us to adopt this, methodology of marking the road. But we've explained that the yellow on the left is a non-starter. Recently, our chief engineer and I were talking, and she said that Utah DOT is also very interested in figuring out a better way to delineate in snow country. So we're starting to talk about how we might team up with them to deal with that. And if any other states or folks are interested in being a part of that discussion, because we know there's snow in lots of states, we're very interested in talking more about that and to kind of figure out a better approach. And that's it. That's the so if you need to get a hold of me because you are interested in learning about how you could help us figure out how to do a better delineation of the road, that's how to get a hold of me. And that is the Arctic Ocean in the background. So there we go. Sorry about those technical difficulties.
You are just fine, Pam. Thank you so much. Great information. Well, we appreciate the 3 presenters for their time. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and go to the questions that you've been asking. We've got 2 that are unanswered, and then we've got a few that have been answered, but we'll just go ahead and start. This first one is for Pam. For residential areas with a high flow of traffic, what is the best way to protect pedestrians during icy conditions?
So, boy, that's a lighting and speed. When I think of residential area, you know, I'm thinking city type streets and keeping folks safe. We have everybody. Safety is a shared responsibility. I heard that at the peer exchange earlier this year, and I believe it to the core of my soul that, you know, we all have to be aware of everybody else out there. So as drivers, we have to be more aware. As pedestrians, we have to be more aware. You know, in general, we have a lot of, our city streets are pretty well lit. We don't have heavy residential development, driveway density type stuff so much outside of that, but that's a tough one, and I'd gladly let either of the other panelists pop in on that.
Yeah, Nathan or Hillary, do you have anything to add to that?
So this is Hillary. I live in Colorado. I live in actually just the western slope of the Rocky Mountains. So we get our fair share of snow. I also grew up in northern Wisconsin. They had 9 inches of snow actually yesterday up there. So when you talk about icy conditions, again, lighting, we know that lighting, just people being able to see, of course, if you've got a big snowstorm, you can imagine the snowflakes and what that might look like. But I know where we are, the treatment of the roadway in terms of, you know, even just when they can get the trucks out there to put sand and or salt or brine or whatever the appropriate mix might be for your particular area, considering the environment. I think that, you know, having implementation of making sure sidewalks are clear. Oftentimes when we get a lot of snow, you do see people walking and biking maybe a little bit more acceptable, but people walking in the middle of the road in areas that have sidewalks. Now, I know I grew up in an area we didn't have sidewalks. It was a rural roadway. The roadway was your sidewalk. But making sure that, again, the plowing operations, are there enough resources that you can get the plows out there, or are there, I want to say, partnerships that if it's a state highway, but a local municipality might be able to get out there and do some of the snow removal. Be aware, doing education on pedestrians, if they're going to be out in those snowy conditions, talking about retroreflective, either putting a strap on your ankle or having something on your coat. It kind of goes both ways, because sometimes you are in conditions where the driver can't see. And so we all have to have that responsibility, pedestrians, just as much as drivers, when we live in those types of climates.
Yeah, and I guess my question would be, are we trying to protect them from cars? Are we trying to protect them from slipping and falling in the road? But yeah, visit like here in Alaska specifically, when things are icy, it's also usually dark, so visibility is a big issue. And so getting folks to wear clothing that's got retroreflectivity on them, right? Having bioillumination, so things that move are much more easily seen than just lights that are static. So I'd say that's another thing to implement.
Great, thank you, everybody. The next question talks about signage for roundabouts. So Amy commented that the reason why they work so well in Britain is because they have signage that's good. It's completely clear how to enter, how to exit, especially in roundabouts. No last second turns across traffic when you realize you're about to miss your exit, which I will add happened to me this morning on the way into work. But is good signage being prioritized in modern roundabouts in the US?
I'll start with that, and Nathan, I'm sure you might want to chime in on that as well. So, wow, this signing, and I agree. I've had an opportunity to be, as part of my research, my dissertation, I did travel to the UK and France and Italy to dive into their practice when it comes to roundabouts. Clearly, they have a much longer history than the United States. I would agree. They do have bigger signing. I would say more pronounced than we do. It's a little bit all over the place in the United States, from state to state. Even though we have a MUTCD, folks, that evolution of what you've seen for traffic control in the MUTCD has changed over time. Marking is another one that you do see some inconsistencies. I do like to see, you don't want to oversign, but I do agree that we could do a better job with consistency and in making sure that people have the exit signs. So having the signs on the top of the splitter island so people know which roadway they're going on. So important that in multi-lane that people get in the correct lane before they get to the intersection, right? So are we giving that information to the drivers enough in advance of the intersection itself that they are able to select, if they're going left, make sure that they're in the left lane and they don't get in the right lane and then cut that person off in the circulatory roadway. There is a study, and I actually had it in my presentation, but sticking to 15 minutes is hard for me. So there is a pooled fund study going on right now, looking at multi-lane roundabouts and looking at the annoying property damage only crashes that we get at multi-lane roundabouts. Now, this doesn't happen everywhere. But coming out of that research, we do anticipate recommendations or suggestions based on the observations for different signing and different marking or sequencing of the signing and marking as some of the strategies that will come out of that. So this is a work in progress here in the United States. We do things differently with signing and marking than they do in Europe and Australia. And maybe that's a little bit of our growing pains. Is that we are still learning. There are some states that take a hard stance on their signing and marking in terms of it being very pronounced and large. Some people might even say excessive when it comes to size. But, in some areas it's still new. And so this is evolving. We don't have this completely figured out yet. Good question, Amy. Thank you.
Yeah, I guess I'll jump in and stand on my favorite soapbox, which is that signing should always be secondary. And Hillary sort of hit on that point. Like, we don't always need signage everywhere, but there are cases where maybe it's needed. But I think that we have found ourselves at a point where we tend to like just put signage up. It's easy. It's an easy thing to do, but good design is physical in nature. We can elicit better responses from drivers with physicality, things that are out there, because at this point, there's so many things competing for information. Again, like whether that's the dash in your car or the phone in your hand or the signs that are on the road, that just, yesterday I'm driving toward campus and just looking at the visual clutter that was in my viewscape. Signs telling me, what the side street is, signs telling me what business is there, signs telling me that, there's a pedestrian crossing coming up, signs telling me that there's a traffic signal just up the road. And it's hard to key in on any one of those elements just because there's so much there. So really taking a step back and thinking about what signage is necessary in this particular case, and which signs can I get away with not maybe using. So that would be my 2 cents to add to the topic.
Great, thank you. And just as a follow-up, Diane writes, do you believe we will, for Hillary, do you believe we will move to more pavement markings that will assist in lane confusion?
Okay, so I have a lot of ideas and thoughts and opinions on this. Having traveled outside of the U.S. and experienced, how they mark, they do mark on the approaches, but how they tackle the circulatory roadway clearly is different than here in the United States. So I think that we have to be careful, right? I think what's the sweet spot? What's not enough and what's too much? And that's why we're looking at variations like wider markings and different patterns, which again, that all has to ultimately get approved through MUTCD. But I really encourage, not that we want 10 more other options out there, but the exercising the ability to do the experimental approval with, so deviating from MUTCD when it comes to multi-lane. We do have some agencies, some states, some local agencies that have done that. Again, sometimes it's just changing a little bit how the striping works, going extra wider. Hilliard, Ohio, a great example. I wish I would have had a picture in my presentation. Hilliard, Ohio, which is outside of Columbus, Ohio, if you Google it, they just, they actually have a couple of multi-lane roundabouts that have given them some fits. There's a couple things that they've done. They've actually gone, because there's a very high pedestrian volume, over 4,000 kids in the 2 blocks to the west of these 2 roundabouts with a high school, a middle school, and an elementary school. So they have biking and they have walking, and then they have student drivers and parent drivers. And they actually went with some raised crosswalks. First of all, there's been some comments about pedestrian and bicyclists. Great design. They're seeing actually better speed control with the raised crosswalks. And they've also done some innovative marking where they've actually done side-by-side 2 solid stripes side-by-side through the circulatory roadway. So they are doing some experimentation because they are trying to get better lane control. They're seeing people crisscross through the multi-lane roundabouts. So I guess depends on what you mean by more. It might be more paint, but it might not necessarily be more or different markings. And so again, this is really evolving. Hilliard, Ohio is a part of that pooled fund project that I mentioned. New York State DOT has their own practice in terms of how they are widening some of their markings to try to get better lane control. The turbo roundabout is something that several states are looking into because they think it has better lane control because there's actually raised channelization on the approaches as well as in the circulatory roadway. I know we didn't have time to talk about that, but again, it is evolving. I do think we're seeing some progress here with that pooled fund project as well as with the implementation of turbos coming.
Great, thank you, Hillary. There's a question. I know, Hillary, you've already provided a written response, but to the other panelists, from Billy's, there is only so much we can do with the infrastructure. At some point, the driver must become part of the safety strategy. In aviation, situational awareness is a key safety strategy which has proven effective, but we rarely hear about it in driver education. What strategies do you feel are effective in reaching drivers?
Don't focus on the drivers, right? I agree with Hillary, 100%. Reach them before they're drivers, right? Instill those behaviors young, right? It's the same reason why they teach composting to children in schools, because they take it home and bug their parents until they start composting. And we can do the same thing with safety culture as well. Teach them to have an appreciation for it early, instill that value early.
I'll chime in. It's a pet peeve of mine that driver education is not required in all states for to get a license. Here in Alaska, my kids didn't have to have driver education. Now I made them take it because I got an insurance discount, and that's the kind of mom I am. But and Nathan's probably aware of this. If you live in a village in Alaska, you can even get a different type of driver's license that doesn't even allow you to drive on the connected highway system. So we aren't educating our young drivers here in Alaska, but that doesn't only apply to us.
All right, great. We have about 8 minutes left. From Brian, traffic safety can be a burnout job due to the daily focus on death and injury, funding limitations to address needs, etc. What do each of you do to continue fighting the good fight in safety? What keeps you motivated?
I'll start. Hi, Brian. I would say that it could change my life in an instant. If something happened to me, if something happened to one of my kids, my kids ride their bikes, my daughter 3 miles to middle school and my son 1.5 miles to elementary school. My dad travels all across the country on a regular basis. He's in his late 70s. He's an older driver. It could change anyone's life in a second, even just in your small community. And so I think that it's a way of life. I am lucky that sometimes there's not any differentiation between like my personal life and my professional life, because, well, it's your beliefs. It's what you believe in. And I believe in a safe community. I believe in multimodal. And I am lucky because I get to practice that in the things that I do every day. And in my working with agencies on deploying proven safety countermeasures and hopefully making people's lives safer, more efficient, and ultimately a better life. So again, I feel pretty darn lucky that I get to work in the transportation and particularly in safety. I started out in construction and design, and over time I gravitated to safety, and it really was I went back to grad school when I was 30, and I had the opportunity to talk with Tom Welch, who was a traffic safety engineer at Iowa DOT, not just talk to him, I got to work with him. And I started to see my career differently through the safety lens than through the design lens. And I think that definitely was a turning point for me.
Go ahead, Pam.
Okay, so I have lost a family member to a car crash, not immediate, one of my husband's family members. So it is very personal. Like I said, I have 2 teenagers who drive, but actually it was one of our division office folks in Alaska said at a very early traffic engineer meeting I was at, said, we have like the best job. Like, we save people's lives. And yes, some days it gets tiring when you're on the phone because there's a crash that's happened and people are complaining and how many more people have to die. And I find for me, sometimes I just have to take a day off, and I have a great boss who's very supportive of that. But these are our family members out there. It's whether they're my family members or my neighbor's family members. It's a calling, I think. Like if you're into safety, you stay in it. Traffic engineers like to sit in their jobs for a long time. There's not a whole lot of going, well, I think I'll go try materials out for a while. You know, at least at the state DOT level, when you find that it's your passion, you stick with it.
Yeah, I would say it was similar for me. Like I was like, I want to like save people, right? Like, and I knew that there was no way I could, you know, I looked at the, you know, the leading causes of death in our nation, right? And, you know, of the top, right, cancer, heart disease, you know, heart attacks. And I knew I would never be a doctor. Like I am on the floor, flat on my back, if there's like any sight of blood. And so that like wasn't an option. And so I'm going through the list of like, why do people die? Like how many people are we losing in this nation? And then I saw that 40,000 number, like 40,000 fatalities on the roadways, and just said I can do something about that. And that's why I chose to become a civil engineer, and then slowly started down the path to becoming, you know, a transportation safety researcher. But I think for me, the motivation continues to be just motivating others. Like I'm not on the front lines every day. I don't often see the car crashes or you know, I deal with data mostly, and anecdotally, I see these things that happen on the road. So I stay motivated by knowing that I can motivate others to tackle this problem as well. But also knowing that at some point, hopefully some point, you know, maybe it's in my career or maybe it's one of like my little proteges that goes off and continues on in the safety world. But at some point we won't have to listen to people say like, you won't believe what I saw somebody do in traffic anymore. Like that won't be a thing, because that like sometimes consumes my days, my weeks. It's just like, you won't believe what I saw. And I think at some point we'll reach that, right? Like that's sort of the vision zero, is to not hear that phrase anymore. And if you don't believe me, like just YouTube car crash compilation 2020, pick a year, doesn't matter, and just watch the bizarro shit like that people do in traffic. And it's bad because they're capturing them all on their cell phones, and so that's part of the problem too. But it's insane. Anyway, so long story short, I stay motivated by knowing that I can motivate others.
Great. And we'll do one final question for our panel before we wrap up. So question, how common are educational programs or presentations on new items like new designs for interchanges or roundabouts during the design phase? WSDOT did it for roundabouts in counties that never had one. The locals were more accepting as a result.
I think I answered that, but I'm scrolling through the questions. So if someone else wants to start, go ahead.
I think at least here in Alaska, it's fairly easy because there's just not a whole lot of municipalities to interact with. And so when we do have trainings, whether an NHI class or whatever, you know, we shoot an email to the NPO, or we invite folks from the cities to come to our various classes. So it's a little easier here from our small population.
And I guess I would just, you know, add that the collaboration is so important, and oftentimes sharing relevant examples or regional, local, you know, they don't want to hear about what's in Colorado. They want to hear about what's there. So, and that's difficult when it's the first time, right? It's the first time in that community or in that region. You have a little bit more of a uphill battle, because there's not one that you can say, oh, well, that one you drive over, you know, in Spokane, that you don't necessarily have that capability. And so, but finding examples that are very similar, you can do that. And then it is, I didn't mention this, but you guys think of your college life or your education. How many credits did you take in, speeches and writing and communication? Okay, so I added up. I probably had 10 plus years of education, and I had 6 credits in that area. We as transportation professionals, a big part of our job, we have the smarts. We got it. We're the technical people. But we have to message that. We have to speak to facts. We have to be confident. We have to be trustworthy. And I think that sometimes is challenging for us. And we have to find the person or the people that can work with us on that. That can be a PIO, that can be your public affairs, whoever it happens to be. Help them tell the story of how you need to talk about that roundabout or about that pedestrian hybrid beacon or the diverging diamond interchange. Because sometimes it's amazing. We're working right now with a marketing firm to help us with some of the everyday counts initiatives. And there's one person in particular that he can listen to us engineers go on and on and on about, name your technical proven safety countermeasure. And he like immediately, he turns that into like 2 sentences and he's like, say this. And we're like, whoa, it took me 20 minutes to get that. And you wrote 2 sentences. So we really need to leverage our people that are professionals in communication, right? We are professionals in engineering and transportation. Find your counterpart in the messaging and the communication and have them help you tell the right story, tell the facts, and have an amazing project. We're still going to get naysayers. My mom hates roundabouts, hates them. I'm like, that's what I do, Mom. You know that, right? So it's really important that we are resilient, and then we find our partners that can help us be good messengers of our good engineering practice.
Where's the clap button?
All right, great. Well, I just want to thank Nathan, Hillary, and Pam. Appreciate your time being here. Thank you, Cole, for your help behind the scenes. And I want to thank each one of you for joining us today. We appreciate your participation and hope you've gained something out of these presentations and the Q&A session. Just as a heads up, we'll make these presentation recordings available via our website in the coming week. With that, everybody have a great rest of your day, and thank you for joining us.